So Lynn, you know, I think what you were alluding to a little while ago is what you would call the pull to wholeness that we have as human beings when you were talking about being altruistic and being born to give and all of that. So we know this shows up because we are healthier when we're in groups or when we're in families or we have a purpose. So what steps can we take to get back to that kind of wholeness that we're missing in our society?
Well, I think there's 4 things we need to do. One is, and we can learn this because it is in our DNA. It's in our bodies. We've been designed for this. We have to learn a different way of relating to people. So it is not just about, you know, what's in it for me. We have to learn to see much larger than we do. And the good news is we can learn that really quickly. I mean, there was it was a very interesting phenomenon with the 2004 tsunami, wherein 250,000 people got killed in, you know, in Asia. There were, you know, with Sri Lanka and around there, there were 4 tribes who watched the whole thing from the mountaintop. Every single one, but I think 1 or 2 of their members had been saved because the elders had forecast this. They had done what the most sophisticated modern equipment can't do. They forecast a tsunami. And when the scientists asked them, how could they possibly do this? They said, no problem. You know, the fish were swimming a little funny and the birds were flying weirdly. And, you know, we knew from these signals that the water was going to pull back and hurl forward with fury. So when they started looking closer, they realized that these tribes teach, and one of them was called the Moken, they teach their children how to see very, very, in a very acute way, so that when they swim, they can swim without swimming aids like goggles, and they can distinguish brown clams from brown stones, even when they're looking from the top of the water and they're looking about 15 yards down. So when they started looking at how they do this and how they're able to make their eyes see so acutely, they did a study using some European children, and they found that just after a few weeks, they could teach them to do the same. So it's in our, you know, it's in our bodies, the ability to see like this. But the reason I'm suggesting seeing much more acutely is not, you know, is not so that we can, you know, forecast tsunamis, handy though that might be.
Although that's handy, yes.
Very handy.
We live on the west coast of the U.S. Good idea.
Absolutely. You could probably do with it. But it's mainly so that we can take much more of an aerial vision when we're dealing with people who are not like us, because that's one of the problems with this individualism. We segment ourselves to only be with the people who are like us. And that is also part of the reason that things are falling apart to the degree they are. Look at the American political situation now. You know, if you doubt that for one moment, you know, it is so toxic because it's about people just not being able to reach across the aisle. So I think we have to look at a different way of relating to each other so that it is not all about, I'm only with people who are just like me. And one of the ways to do that, I mean, there's so many ways I detail in my book, The Bond, and there's a whole batch of exercises people can do to learn how to do this. But one of the things is to learn to be vulnerable. The power of vulnerability is just extraordinary in helping the heart leap across the fence. We always think about dominance as being the important thing. You must be strong with relationships. But there's a guy called Orland Bishop, and I write about him in The Bond, who is teaching rival gang members in Watts, California, how to relate to each other, you know. And it sounds like a complete fool's errand, but he's succeeding because he's teaching them to be open and vulnerable and to share the most painful aspects of their backstory. And there is something about that vulnerability that just opens up a human dimension in the other to move past this kind of individuality to share. And he's succeeding as a result.
That's amazing. I grew up down in Southern California, Watts and Compton. That wasn't very far from where I went to high school.
No. Well, and I think the other thing that's really important is, you know, we are also segmenting ourselves into more and more sort of, I guess, rarefied groups. I mean, look at gated communities. They are some of the the fastest growing communities in the world. And it's all about living with people who are just like us and pushing out people who are not like us. One of the things that I've discovered, and this is my work with the intention experiment and my other work with What Doctors Don't Tell You, but particularly with the intention experiment, I've found extraordinary power in the power of small groups, just groups of 8 to 12, where people band together for a common purpose. In this case, with the intention experiment, it's been about sending intention to somebody deserving of healing. And when I do these in small groups, miracles happen. I mean, we've had some extraordinary healings, which have just surprised me so much. I'm writing a book about the effects of these now. But also we've had an effect on all the participants, not just the receivers of this, but the senders of this change, improve, huge aspects of their lives get better. And I think it's about plugging into this whole thing of plugging into the way we were supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's a really important element. And it's something that I do a lot in my workshops, just show about the power of these small groups to be transformative and also to move people past differences, because there's a wonderful study I recounted in the Bond. That was one of the most beloved psychological studies of all time. And it had to do with, it was a social psychologist who decided to get a group of 12-year-old boys together, and he sent them down in 2 buses to a summer camp. And they were separated, kept separate living quarters. They were given separate names and never met each other until they met for highly competitive games. And one was the Rattlers, the other is the Eagles. Now, watching this from the sidelines were a group of camp counselors who were actually social psychologists in disguise. And after a while, they didn't have to stoke any competition. The boys were killing each other. They were ripping up each other's flags. They were stealing each other's prize money. They hated each other. And no amount of jolly getting togethers would get them to even speak with each other. So then the psychologists engineered a series of crises in the camp that could only be sorted out by the collective efforts of everyone involved. So they put a truck in a ditch, and the boys had to work together to pull it out. And then they put an impediment in the water supply. Boys had to work together to get it out. And miracles happened. The boys began talking together. They began, sitting down for lunch together. And by the end of the camp, they unanimously voted to ride home on the bus together. And it's called a superordinate goal. And by the way, one of the heads of one of the groups spent all of his prize money buying ice cream for the whole lot. So this is called a superordinate goal. And what it means is a goal that it can only be achieved by the collective efforts of everyone involved. And it's one of the most powerful ways, this small group all working together to get people to move past a sense of individualism to a greater whole. And whether this means your neighborhood watch scheme, or a group of people on, doing a landscape brigade in the block, or taking turns on the school run, or even meeting for a book club, anything like that, any kind of little group effort, group efforts at work, just brings people together in an amazing way.
That is really interesting. I've seen that in action. I live on a little island, and the island came together to do a community garden. And the garden became so prolific that we were sending bushels of vegetables to the food banks in the county. So, wow. It was just amazing that the efforts of this group of people not only, the purpose was growing vegetables, but it was so prolific. Like the love that they put into doing the work created bumper crops. Of course, we did have really wonderful weather this summer, but created bumper crops of everything. So they were sending so much to the food bank. It was just an amazing experiment to watch, even though I'm sure it was not meant to be an experiment, but just a group effort.
Those kinds of things are amazing. Mm-hmm. They really are, and there's a good reason why they work. They found in a study of jazz musicians that when people are playing music together, for instance, their brainwaves start operating in synchrony. And the same thing happens when people are rowing together. They did a study of Oxford rowers, and they found when you're rowing together, you have a higher pain threshold than when you're rowing alone. So working together essentially raises everybody's game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no wonder I don't like exercising by myself. Who wants to be in pain alone? Sorry, Roger, you were going to ask a question.
Yeah. So, Lynne, I want to take this in a different direction in the last few minutes that we have here. Can you? I'd like you to tell us about what Doctors Don't Tell You and that work and what you're up to with that and your magazine. And so, can you share that with us?
Sure. And this speaks to the final thing I wanted to say about the bond, which is the idea of being a spiritual activist. That in order for us to change, we can't, it's not good enough anymore for us to just be spiritual seekers, as so many of us are in this community. We have to really be agents of change. And I found that there are ways to be very subversively successful at this. With an experience with my magazine, What Doctors Don't Tell You. As I mentioned earlier, this has been running for 27 years now. It was a newsletter until 2012, at which point we decided to make it a magazine. So the moment we put it on the newsstands over here in the UK, where I live, a very well organized group of skeptics who are pharmaceutically backed, and we know this, it's on their website, started attacking us. They started writing to our distributor. They started setting up staged letter writing campaigns to get us out of our stores. They set up a spoof website. They tried to mess up our search engine optimization. One of my websites, The Intention Experiment, got hacked into with rape threats. There were just amazing things going on. And it finally culminated in a placed article in the London Times, which was, you know, I think Mary McCarthy and Lillian Hellman, the writers, American writers, were arch enemies. And as Mary McCarthy said once about Lillian Hellman, everything she writes is a lie, including the words and the. Well, that was pretty much what this article in the Times was. We didn't recognize it. We thought we had a rival magazine because we didn't recognize anything in there. And the only people quoted were these skeptics. It was obviously a place story. They'd never interviewed us. And that got picked up by, you know, as the press operates in a pack, that got picked up by so many other publications and a couple other papers and the radio, et cetera. They were holding up my picture, burn this woman at the stake. At no point did anyone come to interview us. So we realized we couldn't counter this the normal way. The Times refused to publish any letter of ours correcting the facts. The Times refused to publish any of the letters of our supporters saying that this was wrong. It was really quite unprecedented. So then we started thinking about it, and we thought, well, the Times, which is the paper of record here in the UK, actually only has 100,000 readers, you know, and falling, as most newspapers are. People are not getting their information from there so much anymore. Mm-hmm. Then I started thinking about it. Well, our email list is 260,000. Plus, we've got lots of Facebook pages. So we're about 3 or 4 times bigger than the Times if we want to talk about reach. And then I started thinking about it. Instead of hitting them head on, let's do this like an Aikido master, and let's just send the energy back to them. So instead of, trying to defend ourselves, we took the fight to them, essentially. And we started blogging about this on our Facebook page and we started out by saying, you call that an article? We started to list all the problems of journalism, because we're journalists, of course. And we said, well, rule number 1, you interview the person. You left one message on our accounts department. Is that your idea of trying to get a story? And then we listed all of the problems of the story and how bad it was. And the Times started being on the back foot. The reporter who had done the story started coming on our Facebook page trying to defend himself, at which point, of course, all of my readers and supporters were going after him. So it was really quite hilarious. And the Times the Times just did not know what to do with this. And then we would publish, when they wrote letters back to our supporters, we published them on our Facebook pages, because they were saying, oh no, they're really wrong about things. And so people were just getting appalled. And then when they found one of the staged campaigns going to one of the stores, where the skeptics wrote these essentially phony letters saying,
Yeah.
we don't want this magazine in the stores, we're offended by it. One of the store chains, Tesco, took it out. And our readers were doctors' readers were so upset by this, they started boycotting the store, and it started going really viral, where they were sending out, pictures of a gagged person with the imagery or with the wording, "What Tesco won't sell you." And
nice.
They're going everywhere. And again, and Tesco caved in and put us back on the shelf. And we won at the end of all of this. There was a big international competition for websites of the year. And 2 years running, we won Health Website of the Year, Little Us.
Nice.
So these guys did us a big, big favor. But the point is, we were able to use this as a platform to make a point about, we made a lot of points about medical McCarthyism and how so much of this information we're trying to impart is not being picked up by the press. The corporate press is not publishing this stuff. And so it became a bigger subject beyond us that really incensed a lot of people and went very viral. So I think what my point is, too, about being a subversive social activist and spiritual activist is you don't have to hit it on the head. You don't need loads and loads of money. The fact that our information is now decentralized means that you have a voice and you have the ability in a tiny way to create a stampede of something different and something good and something new.
That's so great.
That's a great story. So, what Doctors Don't Tell You is a publication that you have that's been going, you said, for 27 years?
It's a publication that's been going as a newsletter for 27 years, but 3 years ago we turned it into a magazine. And the very exciting news is it's in 10 countries now. It's been licensed in 10 countries. And it has been licensed in the past in the US, but we are now publishing it ourselves. We're going to be launching it ourselves in the US. So we're very excited about that. That will be happening probably around the end of this year, if not the beginning of the next.
Yeah. Now, I get your newsletter via email, so I know what it's about. But tell our readers a little bit here, because ours are mostly going to be here in the U.S. What is the purpose of this newsletter, and what kinds of things are you sharing with people?
Okay, well, remember, the newsletter, the e-letter that you get is an email letter, but we're actually a physical magazine that people can buy in the stores. They'll be able to buy it in Barnes & Noble or Whole Foods, or they can get it mailed to their door, or they can get it as an e-publication. But basically, what we're trying to do is we recognize that medical information now is terribly biased. Drug companies, manipulate their research. So much of it, they've worked out the latest evidence demonstrates that we've just come off the press that's just been published, demonstrates that just about 8% of all medical procedures in conventional medicine actually have been proven to work. Only
8%?
8% have been proven to work. That's it. The other 92% have no evidence. They might as well be 21st century voodoo. And it has a lot to do with manipulation. Drug industry is now the most profitable industry and possibly one of the most corrupt industries in the world. So we're not really talking about doctors as being the bad guys. It's not the carpenter. So on the other hand, we always hear there's no evidence for alternative medicine. Well, there's a lot more evidence than you know and that people are told. And so what we want to do is expose what doesn't work in conventional medicine. Obviously applaud what does, things like emergency medicine. If I get run over tomorrow, I want the best of high-tech medicine to put me back together. But for chronic conditions, most of modern medicine, a drug-based approach just doesn't work. But there are many, many, many alternatives that have a really fantastic success. And so we want to get that out to the public, but in a much more, evidence-based way. We want to show people where's the evidence for this stuff. And so we cover non-drug approaches to things. We show people how to, really get rid of their pain. What's really causing dementia? And the hint is we're putting it in our latest issue, a lot of drugs given to older people actually cause dementia. They are the biggest culprit of our dementia epidemic. What actually works to overcome senior moments and dementia? What helps for, solving gut problems or chronic fatigue or all number of things? So we have, we just cover that, and we cover individual stories about it, how I beat, we had one guy, how I beat scoliosis recently. And how I beat Crohn's disease, all manner of things like that. So we want to make what is a private conversation between doctors public.
And how soon do you think it'll be before you get us here in the U.S.?
Probably end of 2015, if not the beginning of 2016.
Coming sooner than we think.
Coming very soon. Whole Foods, when we were, there, we were licensed until recently, and we were sitting right there by the till at Whole Foods. So we'll be there all over the place.
That's awesome. So in closing, because I know we're close to our hour with you, what new things are you up to? What would you like to tell the listeners about what's coming next for Lynne McTaggart and her group of friends?
Okay. Well, one thing we haven't talked about quite so much, but I hinted on, is I've been running intention experiments since 2007 to test the power of group thought and see, whether or not it can heal aspects of the physical world. And we've run 29 experiments to date, and 25 of them have shown measurable, significant results. But I've also been running many workshops looking at the power of little groups to heal each other. And the results have been so extraordinary that I'm currently writing a book about it, and what's happened to both the targets, the people who are getting sent intention, and the recipients. And they are it's essentially the power of these circles, these healing circles that are just extraordinary. So I've been doing a lot of work with them in my workshops, and also I've been doing intention master classes to show people the power of intention, how to do intention, how to get past the kind of unconscious broadcasting and the thoughts that hold you back, and how to use the power of small groups to heal. So I have cut back on my schedule this year because I'm writing, but I have one wonderful residential course that I'm running in February 21st to 27th in Costa Rica. And so if people want to go to what is essentially intention boot camp with me for a week, learn how to really use their thoughts, please check it out. And they can do that they can see it on my website, lynnmctaggart.com, under my schedule, or they can go on www.globalg, which is J-I, global, GLOBALJI.org. But that should be really quite amazing. And we've been finding, I've also been running an intention masterclass for a whole year this year and recording the results. And it's really amazing and life transforming what's happening to these people. And they are, also part of an experiment essentially with me, an experiment that's going very, very well.
And are most of the intentions experiments around healing? Is that what you're
always healing? Well, they're always healing an aspect of the world. I mean, with the big intention, because let's distinguish, I've had big intention experiments and little ones. The big ones have been inviting my readers onto my website to or inviting an audience, if I've been speaking in front of them, to send intention to a target that's been set up in a lab or that is being observed by a team of scientists. So we've sent intention to change those light emissions in a leaf, just tiny experiments like that. We've done 12 experiments sending intention to make food grow faster, to make seeds grow faster and be healthier. And we had extraordinary, significant results with that. We've done a number of experiments on water to purify water. We've had extraordinary results with that, changing pH. And we've run 4 experiments to lower violence, We've had extraordinary results with that.
Yeah, Washington, D.C., wasn't that one where you had like a 30% drop in crime?
Yeah, that was in 2 provinces in southern Afghanistan, and also the last 2 ones we've done, which were in the 2 counties around the most violent place in America, the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. We did that. We had a lowering of violence, and we've run 2 experiments for healing of people with post-traumatic stress disorder, and we've had some interesting results with that as well. So we've had some really amazing results. But then the small experiments, I've been also monitoring the participants through all of those experiments, and in my small experiments, where I call them the power of 8, where it's just a group of 8 to 12. And currently I've got a university who's about to study 3 of these groups to see what on earth is going on here.
What on earth is she up to? I'm going to ask you to give us the website again for the Costa Rica intention class, because something got garbled in the transmission at that time, so that people, if they want to find out about joining you in Costa Rica in February, where can they go?
Okay, if they go to my website, lynnmctaggart.com, and check under my schedule, or they can go to globalji.org. They can find out all about it.
Very
and
good.
It's February 21st to 27th, 2016.
Coming soon. Very soon. And the new book, you think that is going to be out in 2016 as well?
Either the end of 2016 or the beginning of 2017.
Wow. So we have a new book coming out. You have the Intention Experiment workshop. It's a week-long learning how to set intentions. And anything else that you'd like to share with us?
Sure. One of the things that I did with our big intention experiments for peace was the 10th anniversary of 9/11. And I partnered with a guy who is like the Deepak Chopra of the Middle East. And he has a big following among the Muslim population of all the Gulf states. And I have my following in the West. So we joined forces and we did an experiment for peace during that 10th anniversary, sending intention to 2 southern provinces in Afghanistan. And it was remarkable. We had some really interesting, provocative results, looking like there was a big lowering of violence in those areas. But what was really interesting to me was the fact that these 2 sides were really coming together. You know, the East and West started Facebooking each other and messaging, etc. So we're going to do it again. We're going to do an experiment sometime this winter. We're going to send it to someplace in the Middle East that really needs violence lowering, which is
global warming. Can you do something with that?
Yeah, so that should be really exciting. And people who want to know about that, if they join my community on my lynnmctaggart.com website, we'll keep them posted about when that's going to happen.
Awesome. Well, Thank you so much, Lynn. It has been fabulous having you on our show today. And we look forward to the things that you might be coming up with here. Please let us know when the What Doctors Don't Tell You publication is available in the U.S. I can't wait to see that.
Wonderful. I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, and we'll put a link on our website for that as well.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, you can link it back to wddty.com.
Nice.
Okay. Those are the main websites: wddty.com for whatdoctorsdon'ttellyu.com and lynnmctaggart.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Lynn. It was great to have you spend some time with us, and we really appreciate it. And good luck with whatever you're doing next. And we look forward to it.
Yes, come visit us again.
Will do. We'd love that.
All right.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.